and in Africa at large. So we will be learning more about what is a clinical trial register, why do we need to register clinical trials, and most importantly, as people who do or who conduct community engagement work, we will also get to learn why is it important for us to know about clinical trial registers and how we and the communities that we work with can actually utilize them. Dr. Dudu, thank you so much for joining us today. Over to you. You are muted. I'm not sure if you've started talking, Dudu.
Can you hear me? Miliswa. Yes, thanks, Miliswa. I've got too many tabs open on my screen now, and I was trying to find my screen. Can I confirm that you can see my full presentation mode?
Yes,
full presentation slide. Okay, that's great.
Yes, thank you.
So I presume I can take it away and share what I wanted to share with colleagues here. And I would encourage that, you know, as I'm talking and at the end, please jot down some questions and we'll have some good discussions at the end of the presentation. But really, this is Duduzile Ndwandwe, who heads the Clinical Trial Registry portfolio at Cochrane South Africa within the South African Medical Research Council. And our work mainly involves hosting and managing a clinical trial register. And the reason why we wanted to share this work with you, with colleagues that are working with communities, it's mainly to see how we can find opportunities to maximize the and understanding as well that you are doing community engagement, and how can we share this knowledge and give you, you know, the tools that perhaps you could use to, to have, as you are doing community engagement, how can we, you know, and foster the confidence in the research that is being conducted in South Africa. So thank you to the organizers of this meeting for inviting us. This is really, really well appreciated and well received, and I'm hoping that we would have more engagements going forward. So the overview of the presentation, I've got a couple of slides that I'll just take you through a journey of what is a clinical trial register, why do we need to register, and understand also the role of clinical trial registries. And then I'll talk about the registries that we are housing here at the South African Medical Research Council. And then the last part, we'll talk about how communities or community teams can maximize the use of registries. These are just thoughts that were coming into mind. And I want to point out that I used to work in clinical trial implementation, HIV clinical trial prevention trials in Joburg and in Durban. So I understand community work, and hence I felt it was important to actually link up with community teams and see how we can work together to maximize the use of community engagement and probably even sharing information, because this is information that is publicly available. So to kick us off, just as a definition, this is just a broad definition of what is a clinical trial register. Basically, it's a database. But within the database, what are the key things that one needs to look at? It is an administrative and a scientific information of planned, ongoing, and also completed trials, with information that is sufficient to identify that this trial indeed exists, right? So you use the clinical trial register to check what is ongoing at the moment. If you are planning to do a trial, you register your information, you're still waiting for your ethics approval, you can capture that information in a clinical trial register, and that is publicly available. So anyone can access the system and be able to access the information on clinical trial conduct in the country, in the region. But we'll talk more a little bit about the role and the importance of the two registries that we are housing here. But just keep this definition in mind, that this is what a register is. So what is captured, one may ask, what are the trials that are captured in a register? So basically what we are capturing is all clinical trials involving human participants. So that covers phase 1 to phase 4 clinical trials. You will find that information in a clinical trial register, right? So, and the key thing is that humans are involved. This is a WHO definition that defines what is a clinical trial register. So we ensure that all clinical trials are captured in the registry from phase 1 to a phase 4. So it's a collection of all clinical trial information in the country and in the context, in our context. So why the need for a clinical trial register? So one may ask, and speaking with community team members, I think this becomes very relevant to colleagues that are on the call here, is that often in times when you guys are going to recruit, these are questions that you get asked about. Why is this trial? Why don't we know about this information? Why the results are so great? What happened? But where is that source of information to get that information? It's in a clinical trial register, which is publicly available, and anyone can access that information. But the fundamental thing about a clinical trial register is that researchers are encouraged, and actually even in South Africa, it's legislated that before a trial starts with recruitment, they need to capture their trial information in the South African National Clinical Trial Register, so that everyone knows what is happening about that particular trial. So that also limits, find that there are some negative probably data that is coming up, and the researcher is like, no, maybe let me just go and publish the exciting stuff and leave the stuff that didn't work. Because we need to know why it didn't work. Can we build knowledge onto that, right? But again, the important thing about a clinical trial registry is that if you think about South Africa, or even in Africa in general, we don't have so many resources in terms of funding and things like that. Why are we duplicating research? You find there's research conducted in Joburg, in Cape Town. So how do we, where do we check if this, if I'm planning a trial and I don't know what is happening in Joburg, and I'm doing the same study, whereas those funds could be split, we could collaborate. It can be an opportunity for researchers to collaborate and build the body of knowledge so that we can advance the health of the nation or even the continent, right? So it avoids unnecessary duplication of research, and keep on recruiting the same participants over and over again for the same study in which the results are already available as well, right? And again, the last point, I think it speaks to the colleagues on the call, which is about increasing trust in clinical trial research, because this is public information. The public can be able to access it at any time, anywhere, and find out what is going on about that trial, right? This is a database. It's like you're going to Google and you just search. I will share the access to these systems, which can be available. Well, they are available for everyone to access. Now, what I want to touch on is the International Clinical Trial Registry platform. And this is a platform that is housed at the WHO. And I'll touch a little bit in the next couple of slides about why this platform is important. If you think about trials that are, a multi-center, if we're talking about multi-center trials, we're talking about a trial that is conducted in South Africa, in Zimbabwe, in Kenya. So that is a multi-center trial, right? And you find that the sponsor is coming from the US, and I will use an example. Let's say the sponsor is Dates. Dates would require that the trial is registered with clinicaltrial.gov. But if we don't capture this trial anywhere else in Africa or in South Africa, we would not know about this trial because it will only appear in clinicaltrial.gov. But what makes it important to have this portal, this is a portal, it's not a registry. It's a portal where all clinical trials are across the globe, and this is a busy slide, my apologies for that. So all clinical trials that are happening across registries across the globe, they feed the information into the ICTRP. Hence, you have a one-stop portal where you can access the information on the trials that are conducted across the globe, basically. And what is important here is that the establishment of this ICTRP portal, it emanates from a response, like a resolution from a 2006 resolution, where there was a need to have clinical trial information publicly available. So there's a lot of signatories around the world that are actually promoting and advocating for research to be in the clinical trial register. And the ICTRP has got a set standards of what needs to be captured in the clinical trial register, and I'll tell you about it. So this is the trial registration data set that every registry across the globe that feeds information into WHO, it has to follow these criteria of what they need to capture. So it's not like capturing willy-nilly, but the fundamental is that the trial registration data sets are basically summaries of the protocols. We want to know the title, we want to know the objectives, we want to know the number of participants in the study. So that is the information that community teams can actually use that information to actually promote even their own studies that they are recruiting for, and also building confidence amongst community members around the conduct of clinical research. So again, I'm talking probably at high level here, but what is also important to note for this audience here is that all clinical trials that are conducted, because now there has been this big push to have all clinical trials registered in a registry. When a researcher like myself, if I'm conducting a clinical trial and I go to a journal and I want to publish the results, the one thing that the journal will be asking me, if it is a clinical trial, they will ask, where's your registry number? Because they would not want to publish clinical trial data without the registry number. It means that the researcher has not even had a plan of how they are going to share their findings. Or for example, they have not even prospectively registered their trial in a clinical trial registry. So we don't know what happened during the course of a trial. And if you understand, a clinical trial can take 2 years, can take 3 years, can be longer. We don't know what are the changes that are happening in the protocol. For us to get to a publication and we make a decision or we recommend policy around something that we don't know how it happened along the way, because even if you change the number of participants, in the trial, it has a direct impact of how you interpret the findings of that clinical trial. So hence a clinical trial register becomes very important, because that is a tool that researchers need to be using to share their information, update it constantly, and making sure that even when they have the results, they need to upload the summary results. And again, here I talked a little bit about the South African clinical trial guideline, the SAGCP. I'm sure everyone knows about the SAGCP guideline, which is like our Bible of how to conduct clinical trials. But what I wanted to show here is that it is mandated, even here in South Africa, that all clinical trials need to be captured in the clinical, in SANCTR, in this case. You may find that the sponsor is coming from the US, the sponsor is coming from Europe or wherever, but the ultimate, because the recruitment site is in South Africa, anywhere in South Africa, they need to register with SANCTR, right? So this one, what I'm trying to show you here is that there has been a lot of work that's been going on about not just capturing what the protocol is, but also now moving a step further to talk about sharing of the data, sharing of the summary results. So there has been a lot of a lot of discussions that were going on for some years. Even now, with still some discussions that are going on. How do we, promote the sharing of data? Because you find that sometimes a researcher is saying, and also there's the other element that we note, that if we start recruiting participants, in our informed consent, are we including that, do we even have a, what do you call, do we have informed consent from the participants to have the data being shared in the public domain? Those are the discussions that are going on, and hence communities and community teams need to understand what is being used with their data, right? And is there equal benefit in the data that is being shared, that is being used? That is where now the clinical trial, registries become important, because everything is in the public domain, and you can argue a discourse for the communities that you are working with, right? And also that touches on to the issue of ethics, right? Even WHO put up a statement, or this position paper, where they mentioned that it is unethical to conduct human research without publication or disseminating of the results. In particularly withholding any data that a researcher would have received. Participants, if participants have participated and the information is not shared. It is an ethical obligation of the researcher to share the information. And in a trial setting, we know that there's, we have these dialogues with our participants, and we share the findings. But to what broader extent is it? One time when we say, oh yeah, we completed the study and this is what is happening. And you can almost think about, what is going to happen if there's multiple publication. Are researchers even going to back to the communities and actually unpacking and sharing this information, because these researchers have contributed to the publications that are emanating from those publications. And then here, what I want to show here is that this is a snapshot. This was done in 2017, that there are a number of organizations that are signatories to this joint statement for public disclosure of results from clinical trials. And the take-home message here is that clinical trial disclosure is important, and it's not going anywhere. Even more so now with the COVID pandemic, where we saw that we needed information to make decisions. And if decisions are not made or if data is not available, then it limits the ability to make decisions to address the current pandemic. Right. So I tried to be fancy and I did some QR codes, but you will see them at the last slide. And if we've got time also, I will also open up one site and one of our registries so that you can we can see how it looks like and how you can use it at home. But basically, these are the URL or the links to join the site. But if you've got a smartphone, you can take the URL, it will take you directly, I mean the QR code, it will take you directly to the sites. Now, I'm going to switch gears now and talk about our registries. And this timeline, what I wanted to show here is that we've got 2 registries that we are housing here at Cochrane South Africa within the South African Medical Research Council. And the timeline just shows our history in managing this database and how involved we have been in this discourse of having trial transparency and data sharing and engaging with multiple partners to ensure that we have clinical trial research in the public domain. The green circles, it just shows the South African National Clinical Trial Register, and the blue one just shows the Pan-African Clinical Trial Register. And what is different between the 2 registries is that the Pan-African Clinical Trial Register focuses on all trials that are conducted in the African continent. So we have a remit for the African continent, and we send information directly to WHO on a monthly basis. So when you go to the ICTRP portal, which is also freely available, you can access it at any time and find all the trials that you are looking for. We send the information to WHO. Similarly, when you're thinking of clinicaltrial.gov, they send information to WHO, so you can have like a broader scope of what is happening globally. The South African one, it's got 2 roles that it's playing. The one is that this is a national register, and it's funded by the National Department of Health. And the purpose for that is that the Department of Health needs to know what is happening in South Africa in terms of clinical research in the country. And number 2, we are conforming, if, as I mentioned, we have to conform to the SAGCP guideline. So all research that is conducted in South Africa, it needs to be captured there. It's a monitoring tool and ensuring that there is transparency in the research that is conducted in South Africa. And I was quite pleased when I looked at the pandemic for the past 2 years. Almost all the trials that we have seen being talked about in the media, you see them, and as the submissions are coming through, and you see that this is the trial that you have looked at it and you understand how are they going to conduct this trial. So this is the information that we capture on both registries, and I'm now going to use the acronym SANCTR. Just remember, it's a South African one, and PACTR, it's about Pan-African Clinical Trial Registry, it's the African one. But we collect the same information. But what is different between the 2 is that with the South African National Register, because it's a monitoring tool for the Department of Health, we require researchers to upload their ethics approval and their SAPRA approval. The reason for that is that we have noted that some trials are being conducted and you don't know if they are meeting the ethical standards. So we're working with partners, regulatory bodies and ethics committees to ensure that researchers are abiding by all these rules, right? We also collect information about the actual funding of the trials, but that is not in the public domain, the funding of those trials. Department of Health uses that information to assess what is going on in terms of the clinical trials and how much money is being spent on those trials. But everything else, it is publicly available. You can access it anytime. The trial description, study design, intervention, eligibility criteria, and that is kind of like a summarized version of the protocol that you would be reading and probably summarize it so that the communities in which we are recruiting from, they can understand. And there's also the section on the reporting. So if they have now completed the study, they come back and actually upload their summary results. Because we understand that even the publication process may take longer depending on which journal they are submitting to, but we need to understand what is the plan for sharing this information, and we don't register a trial if a researcher has not put up a plan on how they are going to share their findings or their results of the study. So those are the things that we are doing, and I think it's quite a useful tool to work with community members, work with researchers to ensure that we are transparent in the research that we are conducting. So I thought I will share with you just some graphics, some analysis that we've done quickly about the data that we look at. So that's the other element that we are doing. As much as we are processing these records and assigning the DOH numbers and approving them, but the fundamental thing, we need to understand what is going on in the registry. And doing this sort of analysis gives us a sense of what is going on. Are there any trends that we are seeing, that we are picking up, so that we can now tailor our trainings or our, if we want to have sessions with the researchers and pick up some of the things that we see that probably are a trend that is happening. I'm not going to bore you so much in detail, but these slides, the first graphic really shows that, over the years since the establishment of the Pan-African Clinical Trial Register, we've been significantly growing in terms of the number of trials that are registered. That's your take-home message. And the orange bar just talks about the number of COVID-19 trials that we have seen over the years, because we also track those studies as well. In the table here, what I want to point out to you is if you look here, the recruitment status, because we want to know, where is the study at? Is it recruiting? Is it suspended? Is it closed? Is it what? Disappointingly, we still see that a lot of the records that we have in our systems are still saying not yet recruiting. But already, if you go on PubMed, you'll probably see the publication of the trial, which is a flag to us that researchers are not coming back to update their records. And it's something that we are working with other partners, SAPRA and other colleagues as well, even in the continent, to see how we can change the mindset and not have registries be seen as just a tick box to get the trial started, but embracing data sharing and transparency in their research. Again here, this is the purpose, and we took like a snapshot for the past year, just to give you a flavor of what we look at every day when we work with this data. And if if we can focus on just the COVID-19 trials, expectedly, you want to see prevention, because we wanted to prevent COVID-19 and we wanted to treat COVID-19. And I'll show you the difference when we look at the center data. What is interesting is that a lot of the trials are in prevention because it speaks to what was happening in the country, right? And here, I'm just showing you the topmost diseases that are investigated in these trials that are registered. And these are just broad categories, because if you were to think about over 4,000, it's going to be a long list. So we've narrowed it down so that, you know, we can be focused in terms of what goes where. What is interesting, and expectedly, in Africa, we're seeing a lot of trials, about 100 trials that are in the category infections and infestations, right? So these are infectious diseases. And this is what is dominant in the African continent. If, for example, we were skewed and we had so many trials under surgery, then we will say, perhaps maybe, you know, the research that is being conducted in the country is skewed towards something that doesn't address the problems of the continent. So this figure tells us about that, right? And when we do our reporting to all the stakeholders, these are the things that we are flagging. Now, when we look at the SANCTR database, the same trend that you see in PACTR is evident there. But what is interesting and striking is that the COVID-19 trials, there were much more in 2021 and 2022 in SANCTR compared to PACTR. And that also needs some understanding, because as much as we were excited, yes, in South Africa, we're doing a lot of COVID clinical trials, but what happens in the African continent, right? Because it's not only South Africa where research is needed to understand the context in which these interventions will eventually be used. But again, the same trend, we see it, about 94 of the trials are saying not yet recruiting, indicating the very same issue about not coming back to update. Some of these trials are already published, or the findings are already there, and researchers are not coming back to update their information. Similarly here, you see the same trend, and you see that prevention is topping the chart, as well as treatment in the past year. And again, in this big category, we see a whole lot of trials in the South African National Clinical Trial Register. And also is another category that we pick up, because we have also free text. A researcher can put other, and then they will write the word. So we took out that word because it actually fits into the big category, infections and infestation. So you see that the bulk number of records or trials that are being conducted in the country speaks to our high HIV pandemic, our high TB pandemic, our high malaria, Ebola, those diseases. And hence, we look at this information and pleased that the trials are at least addressing the health needs of the continent and in South Africa. Now, this is where I want us to maybe start thinking around how we can work together as community members and community teams that are working in community. And if you look at the clinical trial register, there are benefits in using it, right? One, it fosters transparency in research and how then community members and teams can think around incorporating, the link, for example, to a clinical trial register when you do community engagement. For example, how can we build trust in the research that is being conducted? You may find that as you are recruiting participants, you find that people are just like, we don't trust the research that is being conducted. Then you can refer them to the clinical trial registry, where you can say, but look, research has already been done. There's a lot of activity in the research. Have confidence, because this has been checked and thoroughly QC'd to ensure that the safety and the safety of participants comes first as well. So we can have easy access of the results because it's publicly available. It's just a click of a button and you can look at the results and look at what is happening, which trial has stopped, which trial is available. So that also gives us that opportunity to work together. And if you want a more detailed analysis of what is happening, we could also share that with you. And it's a tool, again, to provide capacity building. For example, if you look at COVID-19, there was a lot of different study design, pragmatic, trial design, and all these designs. How can the registry tap into that space and build capacity in terms of the different study designs, right? Because that is where now we can work together to ensure that, we empower each other. As you engage with community, what is what is this trial design? What are the key things you are supposed to be looking at as you are analyzing the data? Because communities need to make an informed decision to whether participate in the trial or whether to take the evidence that is coming up from the clinical trials and say, yes, I will take the vaccine or I will take the treatment. But if we don't share that information and tap into the capacity building for communities to know that these are the things that you need to look out for so that you can have confidence and make an informed decision on whether this was done thoroughly or not done thoroughly, this trial was done thoroughly or not done. You can have access at any time, as I will keep on mentioning that over and over again. But then the other thing is, how can we use registries, especially for communities, because it is in the public domain. For someone, for example, they have a rare disease condition or they want to participate in the trial, because in the registry, there are contact information of the principal investigator of those trials. Then communities can also want to participate and actually contact the clinical trial sites themselves and say, hey, I want to participate, I meet all your eligibility criteria. So that can be used in participating in research. Just as a closing slide is that we want to make sure that we shift our mindset and not see the registry as just another administrative task to get the trial started. This is a tool that is available for everyone, researchers and communities, and it's in the public domain. We need to access it, use it as much as possible to get information about the trials that are conducted, whether in South Africa or in the continent. And communities teams often don't access the registries, right? And because this is seen as the regulatory team within the clinical trial team is the one that will sort out the DOH number. But in actual fact, when you are part of the community team, you can access the registry. It's not limited to anyone. Anyone has access to the registry. It's free of charge. You just go there, you search whatever that you want to search to build your knowledge so that you can have confidence when you go and participate and engage with community. So there is opportunity to capitalize there. And the other point that I want to make is that it provides a simplified version of the scientific structure of the protocol, because it's very brief and it can be used when you do community engagement. You don't have to carry all these flyers that you take to the communities, because it's there. Everyone is using smartphones this day. You can open it up and open the record and see how it looks like, and you can start engaging about the trial. And summary results, again, they are available, and a person can now look at oh, this is the trial that I have participated in. I want to see what is happening. What are the results? Before waiting on the team, the research team, to call a big event and report, because that should be in the public domain, right? And also, again, building confidence in the clinical trials that are conducted. But there is also an opportunity for us as a clinical trial registry admins, we call ourselves as admins, to work with communities, build capacity, share information that you need, and let's foster collaborations on how we can maximize this important resource to ensure that research in South Africa and in the country is done as smoothly as possible. So that is my last slide. And I'll leave this one just for some contact details, and I'm happy to take questions. Thank you, Miliswa.
Thank you so much, Dudu, for such an informative presentation. I have no doubt that everyone who was listening learned a lot. So please feel free to ask any questions. You can put your hand up, and this is the part where we have discussions. So you can ask your questions. You can use the chat function as well. While we are waiting for hands to come up, Dudu, so you mentioned that some of the researchers are not updating their research. And of course, you've spoken about the fact that registering has to be done before the trial starts. Do we have instances of retrospective registration?
Yes, we do.
And how widespread is it?
So if I can take you back to this slide here, if you look here, we've got the registration status. That's where we track it, right? We still have a number of trials that are retrospective. And the reason the downside of the retrospective registration, particularly in the Pan Clinical Trial Register, is that when a researcher then goes and wants to publish their trial, ICMJ says it's a retrospective registration, we would not publish your trial, right? Mm-hmm. So there are those loops and bounds that a researcher has to understand, and trying to force them to do a prospective registration. But with SANCTR, we don't have the status prospective and retrospective trial registration, because that is something that we want to build capacity, and working with other partners, Department of Health, SAPRA, and all entities, and see how we can streamline our systems of registering or capturing trial information before approval, because that will enforce the prospective registration.
Thank you so much. I see Ndando's hand is up. Ndando, go ahead.
No, thank you very much, Miliswa, and thanks really to Dudu for this really great presentation. In fact, as I'm listening, I'm thinking that actually the Clinical Trials Registry is an enabler of good participatory practice in trials, because we have spoken about access to information, access to progress about the trials. And I think one or two questions that I have is to really understand, and I think you might have mentioned this, but with trials, for instance, as we can see on the slide, that have not registered, and yet we find out that they have published, or at least have not even come back to indicate that they have completed. What is your role? I also wanted to understand, within the context of that question, what good practice, because you mentioned GCP as a gold standard for trials, to happen. What in GCP is a practice that is enforced by Clinical Trials Registry, and what do you do about those cases where we find out things are not happening the way they should be happening?
Yeah, thanks, Ndwandwe. That's an important question. And my answer to that is that working with SAPRA ethics committees, it's really for us to understand how these systems work, because currently, when you look at South Africa, there's multiple databases, and it creates a lot of frustrations for researchers, and hence the registries themselves are seen as, Ahmed, that's just the last point that my trial. But we came together, and this discussion, goes to a point of seeing how these systems can speak to each other to exactly do what we are asking about, ensuring that we foster that. And within the registries, we've done on our part, right, that we send reminders every time when a trial, because we've created in the systems that we constantly remind researchers, hey, please come back and update your information. But that doesn't happen because we have not linked up with the other systems. And you find a researcher is submitting a 6 months report to SAPRA or ethics, but then they don't come to the registry, right? Whereas before they submit to the register, they need to show proof that we have submitted to the register. But why is it that at 6 months, when they are submitting their 6-month report, they don't come back and say, yes, we have updated the information in the register, here's what we have updated. So those are the things that we are discussing, and unfortunately on our side, our hands are tied because we don't have any legislative mandate to force researchers. The legislative mandate sits with the ethics committees and the SAPRA. And for us is to feed information to them and say, as you are reviewing that record, we're flagging that this trial has not come back and updated their information. So this is an ongoing discussion, and yeah, it is something that we are working on. And also the curveball, there's a curveball when you're looking at the African continent, because we don't understand what is happening within Africa, within ethics committees. There are so many of them, and it's all about engaging and building that capacity to ensure that people understand that this is a resource and it's actually for their own good to share their results.
Thank you so much, Dudu, for sharing that information. We have some questions in the chat, and I think one is taking us to what we had initially hoped to do. There's a question by Sihle Kapila Zulu. She's saying that in very informative presentation. In case I missed it, I have gone into the PACT website, and it is asking if I want to register a trial. Can I register as someone just looking for information? If so, how? I'll just go through the other questions, and then I'll ask you, Dudu, to please just take us briefly through that website, just to show our participants, like if they're in the community and they want to utilize the platform, how do you navigate it? So then. Yeah, thank you. And then, okay, Phumzile is just asking you guys to embark on a drive to share this information on national radio stations across the country so that it can reach the majority of our people, and also present it to provincial AIDS council structures. We also have another question from Dando saying, what role can advocacy groups play in ensuring researchers' accountability to this access to information registry? And another question from Zhao. It says, in terms of PACT, what is data showing regarding regional registration of trials? Are researchers' country ethics bodies aware of this register? So those are some of the questions.
Okay, all right. So, Miliswa, can you see my shared screen for the PACTR registry?
Yes, yes, we can.
Okay. So the answer to the Sihle is that you don't have to really register as a user, right? You can simply go to the search and you type your keyword there. And what we'll do, for example, just for illustration, I can type COVID-19 and you can clearly see the studies that are, COVID-19 related, right? And it gives you the status, it gives you when it was updated, it gives you information whether, the results are available. So that's a snapshot. And if you want more details or you want to participate or you want to have like a brief summary of what the trial is about, you can click on this information and see whether, okay, this is a brief summary and this is what I can do. It's conducted in Kenya. Remember, PACTR, it's got regional remit. It's conducted in Kenya. And what are the eligibility criteria? So you could outright indicate, see whether you fitting the eligibility criteria there. And the contact information. Remember, I said there is the contact information, but we don't share the email address. Remember, there's also all this POPIA and things like that, so that we have to be mindful of, right? But at least it gives you an idea of who is the principal investigator, where the study is conducted, right? And if there are results, you will see them in this tab here. In this particular trial, there are no results available. Is that fine for now? And I'm happy also to come back again with like a much more detailed kind of like workshop that we can spend an hour just going through the system. But this was just to give a high level of how you can use the system. As you have the QR codes right now, it works the same for the Pan-African Clinical Trial Registry as well as the South African Registry. It works the same in terms of searching. So you just go to the basic search. If you want a more detailed search, then you can go to this field here, which we would prefer that if you want more detailed information, you speak to us. You can contact us on the center admin or PACTR admin and request specific information, because we know how to use the Boolean operators, which if you just want to test it, we would rather you use the basic search, but the more detailed one, I think it would be better that we work with you and understand how your search terms are looking like and things. That's a more specified search function that you can do. But you could find out information around when was the trial registered, like from if you're looking for trials conducted from January to now, you can get that information here. So that's basically the search. You don't have to register as a user, or you don't have to register a trial to be able to do that. So that is where I'm suggesting that perhaps we could have like a follow-up workshop where we can take you through and see what sort of information you can pull out from the registry.
Thank you so much, Dudu. I'm aware that we are 3 minutes to the hour, but we have two important questions that I'd like you to respond to. One is the one from Jauhara. I think she's talking about the trends that you shared with us, especially from PACTR. She's asking what is data showing regarding regional registration of trials, and asking if researchers and country ethics bodies are aware of this register. And then if there are no other questions, I would like you to close off with Ndwandwe's question about, and this is a nice one for action, as an action item. He's asking what role can advocacy groups play in ensuring researchers' accountability to this access to information registry?
Yeah. Yeah, so to answer the question, I think African researchers are aware of the Pan-African Clinical Trial Registry. But the answer would be they are aware, but to what extent, I think it's something that we also battle with. We want to explore more. Because if you look at particularly the COVID-19 trials, there were more in South Africa, not more in the African continent. It's a question that we are asking ourselves. Was it real? Is that maybe a bypassing process within those countries that we did not pick up? Because it's all about the researcher having the ability to register and have the integrity to say, we are registering the trial in PACTR. But that also lies on us to work with partners around the region to continue to advocate and build knowledge around the importance of clinical trial register. So the answer is yes, but then again, I would say no, because how many trials are being conducted in African continent? Have we captured anything? We can't really be sure that yes, we've captured everything in the African continent. That's where now there is room for us to build that capacity in the African continent. And then the next question, Ndando's question is about advocacy groups in ensuring accountability to access to information. I think that this is an important one because advocacy groups hold the researchers accountable. And how are they becoming accountable if the information is not in the public domain? So perhaps then the advocacy group could be looking at this data and say, but hang on, your trial information or your trial research results have not been updated in the South African National Register or PACTR. Why is that? And hold the researchers accountable. I think that's where now we need to work together to see how we can help each other, because ultimately we want research to be transparent, right? And if we don't work together and hold each other accountable, then we're not doing justice to the participants that we are recruiting from, or even the communities that we are recruiting from, because they are the ones that volunteer their time and they don't get the equal benefit of the research that is being conducted in their population. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dudu. Thank you so much for your time and for such a wonderful and informative presentation. And thank you so much, everyone, for joining us this afternoon. We learned a lot about the importance of these registers, and I also like the point that was raised about how this links to good participatory practice. And I hope that as you go home and you start engaging with your communities, it's a tool that you are going to use. And if you have more questions about it, feel free to reach out to Dudu, or if for whatever reason you've forgotten her details, you can reach out to me or to Ndando, and we'll be sure to give you the details. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a lovely day further. Bye.